in the chat, and Zeke will kind of check in with you there. But Emily will take questions and for a few minutes, and then we'll take a break before we go into Erica's talk.
Thanks. I have to interrupt really quick and say that a really astute person just pointed out that the dogs barking made it like a real GTS.
Yeah, oh, totally. Exactly. We just didn't have any children crying in the background. We could use some of those. If anyone
We're not done yet. That could still happen.
Thank you so much, Emily. Any questions? No one else has questions. I have questions. I have a quick question. Oops, sorry. Someone has a question?
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, Jerry. Absolutely. Go for it.
Have you guys considered Tapeats Creek, and what are the criteria for not, using it?
Tapeats Creek has a really large population of trout, and we actually did just go in February to try to do some newer, updated evaluations of that creek and of the density of the trout that are in there, so we could have an idea about it. It is quite cold, and it is quite steep, and so we'll continue to look at that. The larger thing is we would need to work on that the trout population there as well.
Any other questions out there?
Yeah, I have a question. And I also just saw there was a question in the chat, but this is Allison. I was wondering, has there been any research looking at whether the brown trout are moving back out of Lee's Ferry? You said they're breeding there. After they're spawning, are they going downstream, or has that even been looked at?
So there's been a lot of, that's a really good question. There's been a lot of research into rainbow trout, as you all know, and into the rates of immigration and what causes the immigration of rainbows out of that area. And usually it's density related. So as the numbers get really high in Lee's Ferry and conditions go down because the numbers are high, then you start to see this movement down into the Little Colorado area, which is what we don't want. And we have conservation measures and we have mitigations that kick into place when we start to see that happening. Brown trout are different. And so one thing we know is that we can't assume that what we know about rainbow trout translates to brown trout. The little bit that has been done so far, so I guess I'll point out too, we've seen a significant increase in brown trout that is worrisome to many of us. They still represent quite a small proportion of the trout in the Lee's Ferry region, which means that it can be difficult to study them. Rainbow trout, there's this amazing machine that Corman and Yard have had ongoing in that area for a long time, and we know a lot about them. And that machine is poised to also learn about the brown trout in that area, but there are just there's not very many of them, relatively speaking. And so it's harder to make those good solid inferences that we can make with the rainbow trout. But GCMRC is working on another 3-year work plan, and that is really front and center in that work plan to try to get into that. Another thing that I will mention is that we at the Park Service have done a really small study of where we sonic tagged some brown trout beginning in maybe 2016. We started sonic tagging a limited number. I think we tagged 39 total fish. We're limited by, they have to be really big. So if you're gonna put a sonic tag into a fish, a sonic tag is pretty big, so you need a really big fish. So we tagged, I think, 39 and released them. And Bob Shalley has been, along with Clay Nelson, has been tracking those fish over the last couple of years. And some of them stay and don't do anything, but we've seen, I think, a 12% rate of those fish that actually have gone downstream. Now, again, teeny tiny little study, but that's a higher rate of immigration than we see in the rainbow trout, which I think is more like 8% or something. So very good question, very important question, and one that we hope to get a lot more information about here in the next triennial work plan process.
Thank you.
Question. this came over the chat. What would be the most important take-home message that you think we should transfer to our passengers about the fish?
I mean, so when, like I mentioned that we had a panel of folks come from all over to look at Colorado pike minnow feasibility in Grand Canyon. And so these were people, these were Grand Canyon folks, this was us. And it was also a lot of people from the upper basin that had a lot of experience with pike minnow up there. And when they came down here, they were literally freaking out about the native fish assemblage in Grand Canyon. They just don't see that many natives there. So they were very, very surprised and excited to see that we have as many native fishes as we have still here. Even within Grand Canyon researchers, the folks that were working there in the 90s have never seen anything like it. So there are things that are happening in Grand Canyon that are really good, that are really benefiting those native fishes. And I think that that's an important thing to mention, because I think it's I think it's easy for people to say there's a dam, everything is ruined. Why do we care about humpback chub anymore? Why don't we just have trout? And in some ways, the dam has protected us from some of the problems that chub and other fish have faced upstream of the dam. And yeah, so we have below Marble Canyon, we have 95% of the fish are natives. And I think that's a pretty incredible story.
One more question, Emily, unless someone else has a burning question, we'll maybe make this the last question. Okay. A question that I'm seeing is, have the trout moved above the waterfall at Shinemu?
The trout, that waterfall we think is impassable. The trout have come downstream from the Merlin Abyss. They were, you know, probably pre-dam, and you know, there was movement back and forth. I think trout could have moved back then, and native fish could have also, but since flows have been lower since 83 and such, they aren't moving up, but they were definitely coming down from a source population in Merlin.
Cool. Oh, well, thank you so much, Emily. We really appreciate it. Thanks for sharing your knowledge. Thanks for sharing your dogs. It was great to have them.
Well, thanks for your interest. I love to talk about fish, and I appreciate the opportunity to.
You can tell that. You can definitely tell that. Why don't we take a 2-minute break, just a quick bathroom break, and reconvene in just a couple minutes and hear Erica's talk, if that works for everyone. Yeah?